So I'm going to go ahead and start the recording. So it's 5 after, almost 6 after. So we're going to go ahead and start. I think a couple of other people are coming, but they'll just join in with us. So, and I will start looking at the camera now and not look at the computer like I did last time. And Maggie's here doing the filming again. So it's great because we've got somebody who will do the close-up shots. So that's great. So I just want to say, let's go ahead and get started. Joining me for this second of our cook-togethers, and where we'll be making spaghetti squash with orange ginger cashew sauce and broccoli. So that's quite a mouthful. That's why I had to read it. So let me start with last time. You remember? Let's go ahead and I'm going to actually have Maggie go ahead and mute everybody. Can you do it from there? And actually, and then I'm going to, you guys, I'm going to pin myself as the thing so that I think this will make me bigger on your screen so you can see better. But I think you can still see everybody across the top of the screen. Okay, all right. And then I am also going to try to stop a couple of two or three times to see if anybody has questions and so forth. But feel free, like last time, if you have a question while we're going along, it's okay to just unmute yourself and ask the question. And if you'll remember last time we learned that pressing the space bar is a quick way to unmute yourself, okay? So Maggie, and you can give thumbs up to Maggie and then she'll relay that to me because I'm gonna try not to look over at the computer screen. So last week I started with some pre-cooking things that we needed to do. And, but today we are not gonna do that. We are instead going to go right into cooking the spaghetti squash because it takes a while and we want to get that going, and then we'll back up and do those pre-cooking things. So you heard those little beeps. What I did is I just turned my oven on 425. That's because my oven runs a little bit on the cooler side, and so I have to put the temperature up. You can put it anywhere between 400 and 425 for roasting though. So now let's go ahead and do our spaghetti squash and get it going. And what I have done is that sometimes these shells on the spaghetti squash can be pretty hard to get through. So one of the tricks that I have learned is to go ahead and stick it in the microwave. But before you stick it in the microwave, you can see what I'm doing here, if I can get that knife out, is I'm putting vent holes in it. Just like this, going around and sticking that in. And the reason is that we're going to go ahead and microwave this first for just 2, 3, 4 minutes at the most. That softens this outer shell so that then you can cut it a lot easier. Now, my microwave is really loud, so I went ahead and did mine for I think 3 minutes, and that was all that it took. So why don't you go ahead and give that a try and see how that works. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, but I want to give you a chance to go ahead and give that a try. And I guess if you can get yours open like Christine, it looked like you were able to slice yours open without doing that, that's fine, and we can do that. The other reason, though, that I am microwaving it just a few minutes is that's going to make it kind of gives it a kickstart, so it'll cook just a little bit faster, too. So you can think about that. And if you have plenty of time, you don't have to do that trick if you can get it cut open. So does that sound good to everybody? And then while you're doing that, I'll share a couple of things just while you're microwaving your spaghetti squash. Is that, you know, you could cook the whole thing in the microwave, like cook it entirely in the microwave, or you could boil it. But what I found with both of those methods is I don't feel like they deliver quite the flavor that roasting does, because with roasting we get that nice browning on them. And so that's why I'm going to recommend that this time we're not going to boil them and we're not going to microwave them completely. We're going to do it a little bit in the microwave, then we're going to cut it open, roast it, and get some good flavor with that. The other thing I wanted to say about the roasting, what I have found is I used to always boil them, you know, cut side down in like 1 inch of water. But I found that with roasting, they don't get quite as mushy. You do get that better flavor, and the strands seem to come out more, and you get more of an al dente pasta sort of spaghetti squash rather than just kind of a mushy squash. So I'm assuming, why don't you give a thumbs up to Maggie? Are we ready to go ahead and start thinking about cutting this squash? Or I can show you how to do it right now, and then we can catch up. How do we look, Maggie? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to do something different this time with the spaghetti squash. Christine, I noticed you were cutting yours vertically, and I have always done that. Although if I do, I try to stay to the side of that stem because that you can't hardly cut through that. But you know, the last time I did this, I said, why don't I cut it horizontally? I don't know whether that might be just a little bit easier of a cut to make. And so, and this time, it's not going to matter whether that spaghetti squash is a long one or a half one, because we're going to cut it into more little pieces after that. So, but what I've done then is, so I've cut it in half, and I do think that's a little easier than trying to make that big longer cut vertically. So are we okay, Maggie? Okay. Alrighty, so then next step is going to be seeding the squash. And for this, I use a melon baller. And Maggie, could you just get a little, I think you've probably all seen this, right? Okay, it's what you use, like if you're going to cut the seeds out of a watermelon or not a watermelon, but a honeydew melon or a cantaloupe. And I find that this is the best thing to seed with because, let's see if I can show this. The problem with seeding is you got to cut through that darn stringy stuff. And if you don't have a real thin-edged, almost sharp spoon, you just get really hung up on that stringy stuff that's holding the seeds in there. And so what I find is that melon baller, I don't know if you can see this, but it just scrapes right through that really easily. Now, you can also, I think I've got some other options out here. You can also use a real thin-edged, kind of sharp, big spoon. I've got a grapefruit spoon that's serrated. That's another thing you can use if you don't have a melon baller. But can I suggest that if you like squash, then just, you know, a melon baller is like, what, $3 or $4? Invest in one. They're a great thing to have, and you can use them for other things as well. So I'm going to go ahead and scoop out the rest of that stringy stuff on mine. And then we're going to go ahead and cut this into pieces. I'm cutting it into pieces for a couple of reasons. One is to make it cook faster so that we can get it done in the time frame of this class. But the other reason is that the more that we can cut this into smaller pieces, every time we cut it, we expose more surfaces that are then exposed to get browning in them. And so that means we're going to get ever more browning, and like we just talked about, that browning is where some great flavor is. And so you can, you know, cut this in any way that sort of makes sense to you. We'd kind of like the pieces to be roughly equal sized because that means they're going to cook evenly. And then what we're going to do is put those in. I've got my baking dish here, and I hope it's big enough. Last time I did this, it was big enough. So I'm going to put those in here, and then do the other ones. And just a note that I'm using a really heavy chef's knife for this. Some people might have a Santoku knife. I love mine because it's light and everything, but it doesn't have that point that can get into things, and it doesn't have the heft. So that's a lot easier to use a really good sturdy chef's knife. And you'll also notice that I'm trying to get that squash flat side down before I cut it. So it's on the flat side. Well, and even this one, I'm going to put on a different one just to get a little more stability. Okay, so there we've got our pieces. And let me hold that up. So, yeah, Maggie, can you see it? Oh, it's a little bright. Let's see if I tilt it. No, maybe this way. Let me see if I get it over there just a little bit more. Does that show? A little bit, yeah. I'll hold up these pieces. Let me just hold these up. Maybe can you see them there better? That's about the size that I've done. Okay, so now next step for roasting is that we're going to go ahead and let me just check over my notes to make sure that I'm getting everything. Is we're going to go ahead and put the oil on. And everything we're doing now, this is just standard roasting procedure. If you've ever roasted vegetables, you've probably done this. And one of the nice things is that once you learn how to roast vegetables, you can just roast just pretty near anything, including squash. And so I'm pouring my oil over this, and you'll notice that the recipe specified using a neutral oil, or I should have specified neutrally tasting oil. And the reason for that is that this dish is tending towards Asian flavors with the soy sauce and the ginger and so forth. So when we're going to have those kind of flavors, and right now I'm just rubbing that oil all around those cut surfaces. And so when we have those Asian flavors, what we like is an oil that doesn't compete with the Asian flavors. And that would be olive oil would compete. You know, olive oil, we love it. It goes great with French dishes and Mediterranean dishes and Italian, but not so much with Asian. So that's why we're using an oil that doesn't really have any flavor at all. And that can be sunflower, I've got safflower. Some people have avocado oil or grapeseed oil. Any of those will work just fine. And if all you have is olive oil, you can use it. It's not the end of the world. Okay, so then we're going to go ahead and sprinkle with salt and pepper. That's easy enough. And spaghetti squash can be a little on the bland side, so don't worry if you get a little bit of salt on there. It's probably going to really enhance its flavor. And then the last thing I'm doing is I'm trying to arrange this squash. I have some of them kind of sitting up on the side of the bowl, the side of the dish even, because what we'd really like to do is get space around each one of the pieces. And let's see, maybe, I don't know, can you lift and come, I don't know how far you can get. Let's see, there, how's that? That you can see now. You can see how I'm putting some space in between. That means then that all those edges are exposed to be able to get browned, and that's what we're looking for. Okay, in my oven, I haven't heard it beep yet, but it must be pretty close to being ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and stick mine in, and I specify in the recipe to put it on this top shelf. And the reason for that is that the spaghetti squash takes a while to cook, to bake, and so, or actually roast in this case. And so that's why we'd like it not to be too close to the heating element on the bottom, or it will burn before it gets browned and cooked. So that's it. So, okay, so now let me have a second to stop and just see, is everybody caught up? How are we doing on that? Like, do you want to unmute people, Maggie, and just see? Is everybody caught up, or any questions before I move on?
Yes, caught up.
Okay, good. We'll keep going then. And so now I wanted to back up just a minute, because do you remember we talked about in the last class, we wanted to just get that squash started, but now we can slow down just a little bit. Do you remember in the last class we talked about how important it is when you're going to cook to do the pre-cooking steps? That's what makes the cooking manageable, when you actually get to the kitchen and start chopping and dicing and frying. And so those pre-cooking steps were things like knowing what you're going to be making, having the recipe at the ready, having all your ingredients, having the pantry stocked, having your equipment handy, and having some space cleared in the kitchen. So those are all pretty much done. Those you did before you even came to the kitchen, or you started cooking. When you get to the kitchen and start cooking, then those two steps, remember from last week, one is to have your mise en place done. And then that's what you can see here. I've got all my ingredients out, all my equipment's handy. And I know Vince, it was great to hear from you and Donna that Vince really found that mise en place made a big difference for him in terms of making cooking more manageable. And I hope that's continued to be the case for you. The other thing that we talked about is how important it is to review your recipe, though. So you've got a game plan, you know where you're going. And so as we look at this recipe, just like last week, what's going on is that I always write my recipes in these rows. And each row represents a step, or the way I talked about last week, and I always often do, is as Legos. Because each time you learn one of these Legos, then you can mix and match them between recipes and make hundreds and hundreds of dishes, only knowing maybe 10 things, and 10 things at the most. You've got tons and tons of recipes that you can make if you learn those techniques. So this week, we're going to learn how to roast. We're going to learn how to roast the squash. Then we're going to do the same thing for the broccoli, so you'll really have that skill down. If you don't already, a lot of you I know how to roast vegetables already. Maybe you're just learning a couple new tips. Then we're going to go on and make that cashew sauce, and that's what the last three recipes, or last three rows are about. There will be a part where we're going to saute some onions and seasonings. Then we're going to blend the sauce, and that's in the fifth or fourth row. And then we're going to do the finishing steps of zesting the oranges and stuff like that. That's in the fifth row. And then we'll assemble everything together. So that's kind of where we're going. And like I said, we got that first row done. Now we're going to go on to the broccoli. And oh, there went my oven, so I'm preheated now. And we're not going to talk about this now, I'll talk about it later, but I did send you 2 versions of the recipe. One of them is the abbreviated version. And that's the one that just says, here's the squash, roasted. Here's broccoli, roasted. You can see that there's hardly any instructions there, because once you learn the technique, you don't need to wade through a whole bunch of complicated instructions. You can start cooking from the hip. And that's when cooking gets really manageable and kind of fun. So that's what I hope to convey to people, is how to make cooking get to that point where it's not such a struggle and we're comfortable with it and we feel capable. Okay, so I think that's the pre-cooking steps that I wanted to go through. There was one other thing I wanted to mention, which is seasonality. I'm usually pretty darn good. I've been a seasonal eater now for at least a dozen years, making sure that the food that I eat is in season and goes with the season, except for this dish. And the problem was that I bought a spaghetti squash a couple of weeks ago when I went shopping, because I said, this is probably the last time we're going to have them. And I made this dish, and I said, oh, I got to share this with people because it's so fun. But honestly, spaghetti squash is a lot better in the autumn and the winter, especially once the weather gets a little colder, because it's one of those produce items that it actually does better once it hits the first frost even. That causes sugars to come out in the squash, making it a little sweeter and more flavorful. So, but the downside is that the shells are harder. But now you know this trick about the microwave. So in the winter, when you use this and you come across a hard shell, it's not a big deal for you. Right now, the spaghetti squash is coming up from Mexico, and I don't think it's quite as flavorful, definitely not as much as in the winter. But that's okay. We're going to learn this. I hope you'll remember it come, October and November, when those wonderful spaghetti squash comes in. And because of that too, you might have found that you really didn't need the microwave trick that much, because the shells on these squash that are coming up from Mexico just aren't as hard. So anyway, and I'm kind of glad that at least in Colorado, we're having a cool day. So it's we can kind of play like it's still winter. So now we're going to go on to that broccoli, but let me stop yet again and just make sure, and Maggie's unmuting people. Does anybody have any questions? And in case you're wondering, that squash is probably going to take about at least 45 minutes. So don't worry about that. Okay. Well, if everybody's okay, then we'll go on and.
Mary, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Can we use coconut oil?
Oh, is that Ashley?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, you absolutely can. We're going to use coconut oil in the sauce for sure. Problem with coconut oil, except for where you live, where it's hot, here it's solid, in cooler temperatures. And so it's not so easy to use to rub over the squash and the broccoli. So that's why I use the liquid oil for that, but we'll use the coconut oil in the sauce. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go. Is there another one? Any more questions?
Ashley is Eric's girlfriend.
Okay. Well, we're going to mute everybody again, and then you can certainly unmute yourself if you have a question. Okay. So now we're on to the broccoli, and I'm going ahead, I'm cutting off the stems for the broccoli and losing some down on the floor. Let me grab it and wash it. Now, one of the things I want you to notice is that when it comes to these stalks and stems and a lot of things like that, don't throw these away. I've got a wonderful video on how you can use these to make wonderful soups. In fact, I have one of my broccoli cauliflower purees here just to show you. So don't throw those away. Look on my website, or I can show you the link to Vimeo, where I have a video on making those soup purees out of those stalks. So you don't have to throw them away, and you get more vegetables for your dollar. But what I've done now, we're going to just use the florets. And even there, for me, I'm going to cut off a little more of that stalk. And the reason is that I can't have broccoli unless it's cooked really dead. And these probably wouldn't cook enough for me when roasting. But they might for you. You might be able to eat them not, a little crisper. So you could decide on that. But once you get those stalks off, I'd still cut them off. Then what we do, and Maggie, let's see, do you want to try to get a little closer? Or actually, let me roll up to you. There. Okay. Yeah, let me do that. And then what I do is I always tell people to think about cutting off the little trees. And as you can see, as you start cutting through there, they look like little trees. And so what's nice about that, what we're trying to do is, just like with the squash, we're trying to get the pieces to be roughly equal. Because the whole point of that is to get them to cook evenly. And so I'm just trying to get those cut down like that, and they just keep going through on those. And I hope that you've got plenty of broccoli. One, we want plenty on this dish for a lot of vegetable addition to it and all the nutrients that broccoli brings. But then also, if you end up with a little bit too much, you don't have to worry, because it's always wonderful to have some extra roasted vegetables in the fridge. They can go in your breakfast scrambles. They can do a lot of different things. So, and there I am losing more broccoli. That one is just going to have to stay on the floor this time. Okay. The other thing you'll notice is that I'm using a paring knife for this. That might make you a little more comfortable, but if you don't want to get another knife out, you can certainly just use your chef's knife that you have out already. That works just fine too. So I'm just finishing up, and if I see any big stems, I'm tossing those over into my soup pile there. You can also use those stalks. You know, I think a lot of people do this. You probably know this, is you can slice them up into little matchsticks and use them in stir fries. Another great use for them. Maybe while we're finishing up cutting this, does anybody else have any ways that they use the broccoli stalks? Maggie, I'm muting you. Did somebody have an idea of what they use broccoli stalks for? No. You're unmuted. If you have an idea, just feel free to chime in.
Of what to use the stalks?
Yeah, does anybody have any things that they use them for?
I keep a bag in the freezer of all the ends and things that I don't use for other things, and make vegetable broth. You know, you just put it all in a pan with some water and let it simmer, and then start it.
And then Brenda, you might consider, you know, if you don't cook it too long, you could take well, as long as they're not like the ends of onions or something, which they might be. But, you know, the broccoli stems or something could be removed, and then you can lay them, and then, you know, add that to your broth even.
Sure.
Yeah, just to give you a little more body to your broth. Well, my head of broccoli made quite a bit of broccoli, which is great. I'm not complaining a bit. I hope yours did too. Anybody else have any ideas of what they use broccoli for, or broccoli stalks? It could be good with pasta too. You know, if they're matchsticked and then steamed with a little butter, tossed with pasta maybe could be another idea. Okay, so good. So how's everybody doing? I'm going to go ahead and show you what the next step is while you're finishing your broccoli.
Just squeeze it.
What you can see here is I piled them all in one big pile. And again, I'm using a neutral oil. And it might take you anywhere between 1 and 2 tablespoons. And I put them in a big pile so that it's kind of easier to get all that oil in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and do just the same thing as I did with the squash. I'm going to rub, I'm kind of massaging, you might say, the broccoli to get that coated with the oil. And then remember, we want to spread them out. Isn't this great? It's kind of nice to have 2 chances to do roasting in the same class, because then you just get it reinforced. Although I'm going to guess a lot of you have already gotten familiar with roasting vegetables. But it's a good thing to have a rimmed sheet on this so they don't fall off any more than mine already have on the floor. And then I'm spreading them out as much as I can to get some space in between them so that we get browning on all sides. And the only downside of this is, well, I guess it's a good side. Maybe you get your hands all oiled up so that it's kind of like getting a nice hand massage with your fingers get all of some nice moisturizing lotion on them. And then you go ahead and your salt and pepper. This is just the same thing you do whenever you roast, just salt and pepper on. And let's see, Maggie, why don't I move this up here and show it? Yeah, you can see that pretty well. You can see how I tried to get as much space as I can. If you end up doing more than can fit like this with some space, just use 2 pans, no problem. And then I'm going to pop this in the oven, and I specified to go ahead and put that on. Woo, there's got a little bit fog there. I specified to put that in the middle rack, or at least not right down the bottom. Again, just because we've got it on really high temperature, things can burn in there if they're too close to that heating element in the bottom. So okay, there we are. We're done with the second row of the recipe. Now we're ready to move on to that third row of making the sauce. But I'm going to stop again and just make sure Maggie's unmuting. I want to make sure, has everybody had a chance to catch up? And I don't want to go too fast.
Yeah.
We're good. Is everybody good? You want to give a thumbs up and let Maggie know? Okay, Cindy looks good. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. All righty. Well, we will go ahead and then move on to the next step. And I think what I'm going to do is just kind of clean my board off a little bit and get the broccoli off of there. So the next step is making the sauce, and it sort of has 3 parts. And that's where the real, to the extent there's anything that complicated to this recipe, it's around the sauce. And that's a good thing to remember, that if you're making a meal, try to minimize the number of complicated things. So like if we're making a sauce that's a little more complex, keep the other parts simple so that it's manageable for you. So on the sauce, I specified having a heavy bottomed saucepan, and it's got to be enough of a pretty decent size. And heavy bottom, you might be able to see on this one, there's actually like this layer of metal on the bottom, which makes it really pretty heavy. And the reason for that is that when you have those heavy bottom pans and so forth, they just don't burn as well. Now, if yours isn't like that, it's okay, but you're going to have to watch it a little more closely because it can burn more easily. So I've gone ahead, because it's heavy bottom, it takes a while to heat up. So I've gone ahead and heated that up just on medium heat, nothing more than that, and you'll see why in just a minute. And then this actually is where we're going to go ahead and use the coconut oil. And you can put in about a tablespoon, roughly, let's see. So you can see how it's kind of hard here in Colorado, but down in Arizona where it's really hot, their coconut oil is probably almost liquid. So we'll go ahead and throw that in, let that start warming up. And while we do that, then we'll cut the onion. And on the onion, I'll move some things aside here so you can see better. I specified a cup, and I'm actually going to measure it out. I don't always measure my onions, but this recipe isn't all about onions. The onions are in there to give a little bit of light onion flavor. So we don't really want to use a lot. Of course, you always can, but we don't really want to use a ton. So, and then this is also where you're going to see that that onion cutting technique that I talked about last week. This is where it really comes in important to have a good onion cutting technique, because you'll see that the recipe calls for a 1/4 inch dice. Dice just means a little square. And to get it into a 1/4 inch dice, if you don't have a good technique to cut, it can take you quite a while. And you can end up with a lot of kind of misshapen, oddly shaped pieces. So that's why it's really good to practice this. I think y'all saw how I did it. And if you have another technique, that's fine. But I'm just showing you what I did last week, which is my technique, which is pretty fast. Trying to get that grease off my hands before I use this knife. And you'll see the first thing I always do is I cut the ends off and then cut it in half vertically. And then I take the peels off because it's really easy at that point. And then I go ahead and I cut one way, and then I cut the other way. And when I'm cutting this way, I'm cutting into slices that are a 1/4 inch. And I'm going to just move up here for Maggie so she can see this better. How's that, Maggie? I think, yeah. Okay, so let me just show you that these slices are just a 1/4 inch thick. And then I go this way into 1/4 inch slices, and I come out with little 1/4-inch squares, which is what we want. We want to get those evenly sized pieces. And let me turn this a little bit. Maybe this will be easier to see. So first, I've got the knife under my fingers, so my fingers are safe. And I'm going 1/4 inch in one direction. And my fingers keep the slices together. Whoops, except for that one. Wouldn't you know, right when I want to show off. And then I go the other way, the other 1/4 inch. And I always tell people, you know, if you're uncomfortable with these kind of basic techniques, I do have a program that goes through these. I think most of you are probably fine with it. But if you need some help, I've got programs around that. So you can always let me know and I can turn you on to that. So like I say, we're going to go actually and measure out. I'm pretty sure it's like a cup. And this, I did specify you could have used red onions too. That could have been kind of pretty in here, but I'm just using a yellow one, be fine. So I'm just using a cup. We'll save this for another dish. And I'm going to go ahead and put those in. And my oil got a little bit hotter than I might have wanted. And I'll tell you why, but it kind of got a little hotter than I wanted. Remember, that's kind of the sound that we would have wanted if we were going to saute it to brown it. In this case, however, we're doing the same technique pretty much, but we're doing it a little bit differently in that we're only going to take these onions to the point where they're translucent. And I'm sure you've seen that in recipes before, and maybe you've wondered, well, what the heck does that mean? And Brenda, I'm sure that if you were here, we would save these onion peels for you, for your vegetable broth. I do the same thing, so I'm going to set those over there and get them out of the way, though. But what is translucent? Translucent means that the onion is starting to get transparent. In other words, if you look at the onions that you've got on your thing, you can see that they're solid white. Okay, we're going to get them to a point where you can kind of see through them. And boy, I'm having a hard time getting my heat back down. I got that really hot as I was sitting here yapping away. And I'm putting the rest of these onions just in here for now. It made another whole cup. You could have almost probably just cut half of an onion and you would have had enough for that. So, but now what we're going to do is go on. So while this is getting to that point where they're going to be translucent, and I'll try to show you that. You know what? I put mine in, it's only been like maybe 3 minutes at the most. Would you say maybe? And mine are already starting to get translucent. So take a look at yours. Last week, we were looking for them to get brown before we stirred them. This week, we're not looking so much for the brown. We're just looking for them to cook slowly and become that kind of see-through-ish look. They'll get shiny and see-through-ish. And I tried to identify, sometimes you just do things because it's kind of instinctual. So I tried to figure out what is the reason for that. And I think it has to do with the fact that when they're just translucent, they still have a little bit of that oniony bite to them, which is kind of good for this cashew sauce because the cashew sauce is really rich and creamy. And it can use some balancing, which we'll talk about later too. So while that's cooking, I'm keeping an eye on it, but take a close look at your onions and see if they aren't becoming just that little bit translucent. And now mine have finally slowed down and you can hear that sizzle now is really where you want to be. Just kind of a gentle sizzle, not that huge one that like when we were sauteing last week or a couple weeks ago, whenever that was. Okay, so here we go. Here's fresh ginger. I'm sure you've all probably seen this. You can use jarred ginger. I think it has kind of a canned taste to it. So I much prefer fresh. And it's kind of a gnarly looking thing. But what I usually do is I broke off one of the fingers there because that makes it easier to grate. I've already washed this and it's dried. So if you haven't washed it, I would wash it. And then I see that there's one little piece on here that looks kind of gnarly and maybe bad. So I'm going to get rid of that. And then I'm going to take that cut end and I'm just going to grate it right onto my little handy dandy $4 grater here. Now, if you don't have a grater like this, no problem. You can also use, I've got a box grater here that you can use too. And it's got a small hole, then that will work okay. Some people might have a microplane. And I'm gonna, and anything else, you can slice it thinly and chop it if you don't have any of those. But if you don't have a little grater like this, you might want to invest in one because they are so handy. And now I've got a little stub left over, and if you are a tea drinker, you can throw that in with your herbal tea because it makes a really wonderful tea that is really yummy tasting and also very nutritious. So let's look at, first, let's head back if you haven't. Take a look at your onions. Mine are definitely, they're actually starting to brown, which is okay. I prefer not to do that, so I'm going to turn mine down even more, which you'll want to do anyway because we want to put the ginger and we don't want it to burn. So go ahead and turn it down to low, medium low at the most. Okay, and mine are definitely looking much more translucent. Bear in mind, they're not going to get completely see-through. That's not what, I mean, they'll never get there, so that's of course not what we're doing. But you're just looking for them. I'm going to try to find a couple good ones that aren't brown, but they do see this. Let's see if we can catch this on the camera for you. Let's see, maybe just, yeah, I think, can you see how those are kind of starting to get see-through-ish? I'm trying to move it around. I don't know if I'm doing more good harm than good. Okay. And you can see that it only took about 5 minutes. In the recipe, I said 5 minutes, maybe 6 or 7 minutes. But yours are probably done, okay? And now, of course, if you think they might not be done enough, like you would not like them, that's maybe still too raw for you, cook them some more. That's no problem at all. But I think they're just right for me. So now we've got our ginger, and you saw that that was maybe a 2-inch piece. That made exactly 1 tablespoon of lightly packed ginger. And when I say lightly packed, let me show you again. I put it in, and I just, tap it just a little bit. I know in one of our classes, we have cooking groups at different tables, and I came back over, and they were like stuffing all this ginger in here, and I kind of had to laugh because it's like, boy, that's going to be a really ginger dish. But when it says lightly packed, you only want to put in, just lightly packed, not cramming in as much as you can. And always be cautious. If you're new to ginger or you don't know how much you like, don't put quite as much in. You can always add a little more later if you need to and let it cook a little bit in there. I am actually going to add the rest of this though because I love ginger in things, and that little bit extra is about what I would love to see. But if you're new to it, stick to the 1 tablespoon that the recipe talks about. And then I'm going to go ahead and put that in and the chili flakes. Now you've got an option to do cayenne pepper or chili flakes. I am trying the chili flakes this time because I felt like last time I liked the cayenne pepper, but it didn't have quite enough heat to me, heat white. So I'm trying 1/8 of a teaspoon of chili flakes. And you might remember last time when we did the little hole in the middle trick, and one of our class members, Lisa, she was playing with that the next week, which is great. I am not doing that this week. You can, just because we've got such a small pan that we're working with. And we've got plenty of oil in there, and everything's getting mixed in with that really well. But you can always do that hole in the middle trick. That's no problem. So I think that we've got this part of the recipe done. We've got our kind of our flavor foundation for the sauce. So now I'm going to turn that way down, and then we're going to go over and do the next part of the sauce, which is to blend the cashews and the broth. And I'm using my bone broth, but again, you could always use a vegetable broth or a store-bought broth, whatever you've got. But Maggie, if you want to, and so I'm just measuring in the broth and the cashews. And one thing I didn't specify in the recipe, but we learned this last week, is that it's good to put the liquid in first and then put the dry stuff on top. And it won't be the end of the world if you don't do that, but I think it makes it just blend up a little more easily. So, but while I'm doing that, maybe you want to unmute and see if we're having any questions or if anybody's having any problems. Anybody, any problems or issues about things? Okay.
I'm good, Christine.
No.
Yep, everybody's moving along. Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. And you know what? The one thing we might want to do before we blend, why don't you take a look at your broccoli? The reason is that broccoli is one thing. I told you I have to have mine. I forgot to get my pot holders out. I have to have mine cooked almost to death. And so I'm not a good gauge, but you might be somebody who likes your broccoli a little crisper. So what you always do is you take a fork and you stick it in the broccoli, pull it out, stick it in the broccoli. Whoa, that's hot. And just see if it's done to your taste. And if it looks like it's close, taste a piece. Mine, I can see, is quite hard, so it's nowhere near for me, but it might be for you. And you know what? This is actually a really good time to also stir it. And so we can get a different side down on the pan and get things spread out even more again so we get more browning. So go ahead, and this would be a great opportunity for that, because that is one thing when you're doing small pieces. About halfway through the cooking time, it is a really good idea to always take and move things around. Don't need to do that so much with the squash because there's not much to stir, but it's great to do with that broccoli. So go ahead and do that. And while you're doing that, then what I'm going to do is run my blender, because it's, as you know, I think from last time, these Vitamixes are really loud. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. I think that's probably enough. One of the things when you're making your sauce is you've got to decide how smooth you want it. When I first started making this sauce, I did it in the food processor, which you just can't get things really smooth in a food processor. And so mine still had some kind of small, tiny chunks, graininess to it. I liked it okay, but I got to tell you, I like it a lot better. Done in the blender, really smooth as you can get it. But you know, like try it that way. And then next time, if you feel like it'd be better with a little texture, you can certainly do that. So what I'm going to do then is mine is really pretty smooth. It's like real smooth pancake batter right now. So I'm going to go ahead now and pour that right into the onion mixture that's on low heat. And then we're going to cook that down a little bit. And then here's the thing, is that my daughter's so nice. She helps me test these recipes. And when she made this, I told her, you know, the recipe that it did say, you know, add more broth if needed. She didn't realize, though, that this sauce we actually want pretty darn thick. And so that's why I amended the instructions to say that let's not add any of that extra broth now. Let's let that cook a little bit. I'll set this over here. And then if it gets really thick and starts sticking to the bottom of the pan and stuff, then we'll add some more. Now, I am noticing that mine is already starting to stick just a little bit because my ginger and stuff had started sticking in the pan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take a spatula and kind of, this is what we call deglazing a pan. When you put a liquid in and you scrape off all those bits and pieces. And I can tell you that mine's already getting thick. Is anybody else seeing that in your pan? I don't know. Yeah, well, yeah, you want to unmute them and see. And is anybody else noticing their sauce getting real thick?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't worry. Stir it well. Stir it well and make sure that you get everything stirred off the bottom of the pan. And then, I would let that simmer just a minute. Don't get nervous quite yet and put a bunch of broth in. And when you do put some extra broth in if needed, you're only going to put in like a tablespoon or two at a time, okay? Because here's the thing, is that we're going to put on the spaghetti squash. Spaghetti squash is pretty bland. So we need a thick sauce that will kind of congeal and stick to the spaghetti squash and not just run off. Because that's what my daughter found, is her sauce was too thin and it didn't really stick to the squash and make a nice thick sauce that really sticks to it. Like, you know how you want your marinara sauce really thick for it. So I'm going to take a look at mine again, and I think it's okay. I'm going to just let it simmer. I've got it on the lowest heat possible. And I'm going to leave that there and go ahead on now and do the last couple steps that we have. Can you believe we're just cruising through this recipe? I'm loving it. But we do have 2 more steps, and that is zesting our oranges and juicing them. And that does take a little bit more time. Let me get my other measuring cup here. So zesting an orange. And I forgot to get my zester up, so let me get it. So here is what a zester looks like. And Maggie's gonna come up on that. There we go. And let me turn it there, and you can see it. So it's got little holes across the top. And actually, Maggie, I'll just move up here because I think everybody might want to see this. And so what I'm doing is, if you have a zester, this is what you do, but I'll show you some alternatives if you don't. What I do is I hold the orange very firmly so that I can make the skin really taut. Because that's the key. If the skin isn't taut, which means tight, then the zester won't do much. It will just kind of blob along the surface. So here I am, I'm kind of squeezing that orange to make it taut. And then I just go around the orange like that. Okay, and that makes this nice little pile of zest here. But now, what if you don't have a nifty little thing? Again, this is kind of a gadget class, I realize. I don't usually use this many gadgets, but a zester, a melon baller, a little grater, these are some just like $5 tools. Just invest in them because you use them a lot. So this little grater that we used for the ginger, you can use it to grate the orange as well. The big thing you got to watch for if you're doing that is, again, you got to squeeze it. It's a little slower, I have to say. That orange is getting me. You got to squeeze the orange so that it can grate. And like I say, that's going to be slow. That may not work as well. So but you can also try, sometimes box graters they do have a rasp on them. I don't think that works as well either, but let's show you the way it works. Most of the orange peel just gets caught up in the grater thing. That's what I found. But you could try this medium-sized bowl. Let's see if that works. And nope, it doesn't really. So final try. So you can see why I get a zester. The other thing you can do is use a vegetable peeler. And you can see that what you can do, and my oranges are soft because I had them for a while. They get a little harder orange here, and see, because you should be able to, there we go, peel that peel off. Can you see that peel? You stack it up, and then you chop it. Slice it and then chop it, and then you got your orange zest that way too, okay? So, why don't you take and unmute it and everybody tell me what are you using to zest your oranges?
Hey, it's Christine. I have a zester,
Yeah.
but can they go dull?
Well, I haven't had mine go dull. Are you having trouble with it, Christine?
Yeah, it's not my favorite tool yet.
Oh, show me yours, Christine. Let's see. Okay. Just a second. I got to get you on there. Yeah. Christine, are you really like grabbing that orange and really holding it tight and squeezing it?
Try that a little better. I don't want to get squirted.
You shouldn't, because you're not going to get all the way through the skin.
That helps. I mean, that does help. Yeah.
This is like a strengthening exercise. This is your workout.
Oh, okay.
You squeeze your orange. Does that help, Christine?
Yeah.
If it doesn't, then try the peeler, because the peeler worked really good.
Mary's doing it all.
Is it working?
Yeah.
The other thing is, and I would do 2 oranges. So there's a couple of things I want to mention on this. Number one, but check your sauce and make sure that it's okay. Mine is actually starting to stick to the bottom of the pan. So I'm going to add just a couple of tablespoons of broth so that I don't sit here and ruin my sauce while I'm blabbing. So check your sauce, and I've got to scrape the bottom of my pan again because it does tend to stick to the bottom of the pan. So I'm using my little spatula and sticky because it hasn't burned. It's just starting to stick. You want to catch, that's when you want to catch it. And what we may do is even turn this off at this point because it's cooked. It doesn't need to cook that much. Just want the, the flavors to kind of meld together a little. So let's go ahead and just turn that off so nobody burns their sauce up, okay? If we have to, we can turn it on and heat it up a little bit. The other thing I'm really thinking about too is we should check the broccoli and see how it's doing. I'm gonna guess that for most people, that broccoli is done. I'm the only odd one, I think. So tell me, I think, and Megan, do you mind unmuting me, Jan, and just see? Everybody tell me, mine looks beautiful. It's got some beautiful browning, and I think it's just right. What is everybody else's like?
Yeah. Yeah, good. Mine's done. Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, well, just set that aside then. Good. And now we're just waiting on the squash. And maybe what you want to do too is check your squash. It doesn't hurt to just kind of see about where it is in terms of doneness. I'll pull mine out. And mine is getting some nice browning. You might be, some people might think that's getting burned, but I like it. And you know what? Did you catch that? Where I'm starting to pull the spaghetti squash away. But you know what? I'm still sticking my fork in there, and it's still pretty hard, even though the spaghetti squash is starting to pull away from the skin. I think this needs more cooking myself because I can hardly stick the fork in here. So I would do more. Now, when you're on your own,
Yeah, I want it to.
the way you know is that you always just taste things. That's the best way to know is, how does it taste? Does it taste enough? You might like your spaghetti squash less done. I like mine more done. I'm a little more of a mush person, so I want it more done. But it might be done enough for you. I don't think so quite yet. But if you're curious, just taste that and see, and then taste it again in a couple of minutes, or maybe another 10 minutes. See what you like better. Okay, so now we're back to our oranges. And one thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned, and I did specify this in your shopping list, is to make sure that you get organic oranges. Because I was just looking that up, and a lot of people might think, well, okay, what if I get a conventional one? I'll just wash it. But I was looking it up, and Dr. Weil had a little ditty on that and was saying that a lot of the pesticides that they would put on an orange, they don't wash off even when you wash them with water. So he recommends that you would never use the zest on from a conventional orange, and I think that's probably good advice. So if that's what you've got today, don't worry about it. It's not the end of the world by any means, but think about it. That orange powder is kind of coming up into my throat. But think about it in the future. And let's see, when we're zesting, and especially like if you're using a microplane or a grater like this, sometimes you're going to get down, you can see we're getting down to that white part, and that's called the pith. And the pith is often kind of bitter. And I read this one guy today, and he was saying, oh no, the white part is just tasteless. I'm going, I don't think so. I mean, to me, it's pretty bitter. So I don't want to get that in mind. So when you're zesting something, you want to not get way down, keep going and going and going to where you're getting that white part. Let's see, I think you can see how I've gotten most of this. Sometimes I go different directions, to get it. But so there's some white showing through, but not much. And I think what you're going to find is I really like the flavor of this orange zest in the sauce. So that's why I tried to get as much as I could without getting into the pith. I think you're going to like it. If you're uncertain though, add only half of it, and then you can add more. It's easy to stir in. So now we've gotten that zest in there, and now what we're going to do is go ahead and juice the oranges. And I called for 2 oranges, and I think that's what you're going to need, but I had to get an extra one just in case. And I also told you to get Valencia oranges because those are the ones that are juiciest, and they're also usually the ones that are most reasonably priced. And so you don't need any fancy navel oranges or blood oranges for this, so just get the Valencias. And now what you're seeing is I'm using a thing called a citrus juicer. And they've got them in different colors, orange for oranges, lemon, yellow for lemons, and then there's even a green one for limes. But you can get by just fine if you just get this middle one, which is the lemon juicer. But I happen to have an orange one, so I'm using it. And this is interesting because I am finding that this orange is so juicy that I might be able to get the entire, I think it's a half a cup, right? Yeah. I might be able to get the whole half a cup out of just one orange, which is no problem. Well, I'm a little bit shy, so I'll use a little bit more. And then the other thing I was going to say is, I'm a person who's always advocating against food waste. And my tenant is now just laughing because I'm always telling her, oh, Meg, no, you can just use that, no problem. Just cut off the bad part of that cheese. Or so anyway, everybody knows, and people who take my classes know that I'm always using things. And then like these oranges, I would not throw them away later on. I would go ahead and eat the pulp part of them. They're really good. And while you're at it, you can eat some of that pith because both the zest and the pith apparently have lots of nutrients in them. I was amazed at how many. So especially in this time where we need lots of nutrients, it's good for eating the zest. And eat a little bit of that pith if you want, and don't throw away these. You can eat that part as well. So, okay, so we've got our zest, we've got our orange juice. Let's see, we need the soy sauce and salt if we need it. Now, big important thing is you don't want to add the zest or the juice until after this is off heat. So if your sauce has kind of cooled off, you might want to go ahead and turn it on, warm it up, because once you put these in, we don't want to warm it anymore. The reason for that I've always thought is that what I find is that citrus juice has such a nice bright flavor. When you cook it, it feels like, what I found is that kind of dissipates that flavor. And we don't want to do that. But it's interesting, I looked it up today to see what other people thought. And Bon Appetit said that they recommend the same thing. You don't add it until after the dish is off heat. But they said, and I'll see, they said that it gets discolored when you cook it, and the flavor gets more bitter. So whatever your reason is, don't add it until after it's off heat. And so I turn mine on, my sauce on. I'm heating it up just a little bit more, so I can see it's steamy. I'm going to turn it off. Now I'm going to go ahead and add in my juice, stir that in, which is, you know what? That's another reason why you might not, don't add too much extra broth to your sauce, because we're going to add that whole half a cup of juice, and that's going to thin it out quite a bit. And now I'm going to go ahead and add the zest. I know that I love the zest, so I'm adding it all. But like I said, if you're kind of, because it can be a sweet and tart flavor, and you might not like it that much, or you might like just a little bit. So add just half. We can always add more. And then let's see, it seems like there's one other thing, the soy sauce. And I know that it might seem a little bit odd, but between the ginger and the soy, we're kind of going an Asian direction with this. And I specified using a full sodium soy sauce rather than light. What I have found is that if you really want some soy flavor in things, which is what we're doing here, you don't want the light because it doesn't add that much flavor. So you have to add 2 tablespoons to get 1 tablespoon of flavor. And there you're getting the same amount of sodium. So I never really bother with the low sodium soy sauce. But if that's what you need to do, go right ahead. That's no problem. But that gives us our kind of our Asian flavor profile for this dish. The last thing that I've got in the sauce is a 1/4 teaspoon of salt if needed. And you might say, well, why would I add salt if I've got soy sauce? Cashews are pretty bland, and you can see we don't have any other salt in this besides the soy sauce. It may be that you feel like it needs a little more salt, but you don't want more soy flavor. So what you do is add just a little bit of salt and not just more soy sauce. So this brings us to the part of the recipe that's so critical, but so often forgotten, which is tasting and adjusting the seasoning. You've got to taste this and see what you think. So I hope you all had your tasting bowl that was in your mise en place, to have a tasting bowl there and a tasting spoon. And what you're going to want to do is go ahead and taste this. The other thing you're going to want to do is have, try it with the lime. Because I need to explain one thing. And I think we're all okay. Your sauce is off and everything. And we got a couple more minutes here. Because this is really important. When we're cooking, cooking is all about two kind of big things. And there's lots to it. But two big things we're trying to do. One is to build flavor. And that's why we do things like brown the squash, saute the onions a little bit, get the ginger in there. Those are all things about building flavor. And the more that we can build layers of flavor, generally the better our dishes come out. And if you don't get 10 layers and you only get 5, it's no problem. But the more you learn to do that, that's going to make your dishes better and better. The other big thing we're doing in cooking to make dishes that are really satisfying is we're trying to balance flavors. And in American culture, we do a lot of dishes that are fat, sugar, and salt. And so we have a pretty limited palate. But when you get into the ethnic cultures, what you find is that they use acids, they use the lemons and the limes and tamarind, and then they use the gingers for pungency, and then they add, the hot stuff, and they add, some sweet, yes, and I can't remember all and some sour things, some bitter things. What they're doing is combining all those things together. So what's happening is you're hitting all the flavor taste buds in your mouth instead of just sugar, fat, and salt. And so so that's what we're doing. That's why we add all these different elements. And so when we do that, what's nice about it is we get a dish that has a more balance of flavor, because the cashew sauce, I love cashew sauce. I make cashew milk all the time. But on its own, it's a little bit on the bland side, almost a little cloying, which means unpleasantly excessive. I looked up that word to see what does that mean, because it's exactly what this sauce would be if you didn't add all these different flavors. It would be really rich, really creamy, but it just wouldn't have much beyond that. So that's why we're adding all this, and that's why now when you taste it, I want you to taste and go, gosh, is this just too bland still? Do I need more chili? Do I need more salt? Maybe more soy sauce? But I also want you to try it with the lime, because the lime is adding the sour to this. We've got the chilies making it spicy. We've got the ginger for pungency. We've got the soy for salty. What we don't have, we got the oranges for sweet, but what we don't have is a little lemon. So actually, I should have told you, taste it without the lime and then taste it with the lime, okay? And then see what you think. And I know that I love this one, but for me, that lime is key. Otherwise, it would be a little too bland and cloying still. So I wonder if everybody could taste theirs, and I like mine with the chili flakes too, because I'm getting the heat from the chili flakes at the end. So I wonder if everybody could taste their sauce and see what you think. And while Maggie's unmuting you, I want to tell you that a lot of times people are afraid of adding like heat, whether it's the cayenne pepper or the chili flakes. You don't have to add much, but it's all about the balance. It's not about making this a hot dish. It's about balancing. So do I hear anything from anybody about what do they think of that sauce?
Really good. It's very good.
Okay.
Very good. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and do you feel like it's balanced? And is it going to be cloying if you eat it on, you're going to put a fair amount on your spaghetti squash?
No, it's going to be good.
Okay. Well, just know, do you understand how you would adjust it? You could add more soy sauce, more cayenne pepper at this point, maybe more orange zest. Mm-hmm. Those are all the different elements that you can add, okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think we're kind of getting ready to wrap this up. Are y'all ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I don't know is whether your spaghetti squash is going to be done. And so it may. Okay. Did somebody say that theirs was done? It's okay. Okay.
I think I missed the lime and cilantro.
Oh, we haven't done them yet.
Well, good. I don't miss that.
Donna, I was just you put a little lime in when you were testing the sauce, because it's going to be We're going to add it at the very end, and it's a critical part, but I wanted you couldn't really adequately test the sauce without the lime in it. That's all we did. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, I'm going to assume Maggie's there, so you just let her know if you want to have a question about it. Okay, so Maggie, let's see. You know what? I am going to make some room. Well, can you just move the camera right over here? Let's do that. Okay, there you go, right there. That's perfect. Now, as I stick my fork in, my squash is still a little bit hard when it gets closer to the shell. But the top part is coming off really nicely. And it's kind of al dente, which a lot of people like it. Like I told you, I'm a mush person. I'd like mine probably more done. But taste, right? So I'm going to go ahead and taste it. Don't show me what I'm tasting. Yeah, and I think it's actually really sweet and pretty nice, I'm thinking. So I think mine's ready to at least scoop out. And what I may do, I'm going to scoop out the top parts of it. And then I'm going to put the bottom parts back in the oven for just a little bit longer. And now you'll see I'm doing a funny thing, which is to put on my rubber gloves. And you can do the same thing. And the reason is because I don't have time to let this cool, and you may not either. So I have washed my rubber gloves. They're all clean and everything. But it makes it a lot easier to scoop that squash out. So if you want to try that, or you have a little more time, because you can just wait till after class when your squash is cooler to scoop it out. But I want to go ahead and kind of show you how this is all going to pull together here. And I'm using just a spoon to get mine out. And it seems like the spaghetti is separating into strands just fine. So I'm going to do just that much for now, just so we can show you what's going on here. So I've got this, and it's got some nice browning. Like I told you, it's coming out really sweet with a lot of flavor. And then what I'm going to do is just imagine that I've got it all scooped out in here. Then I'm going to go ahead and put my sauce in. And my sauce is a little on the thinner side. I could have not added that extra broth and I would have been fine. But that's okay. I'm going to put that sauce in here. It's still thick enough. And what I said is that your sauce is going to be, here, okay, I'm going to do it in here. This is how thick my sauce is, and it could actually be a little bit thicker than this even, I think. It would stick better to the spaghetti squash, but it's kind of like a really thick pancake batter. And like I say, it could have been closer to tomato paste, and I think it would have been better. And then I take my broccoli and put this on and just make a beautiful presentation. And you know, the thing about the broccoli is I love the roasted broccoli because I like the flavor of it. Because it has more flavor. But if you wanted a dish that was maybe just a little prettier, so the broccoli would be a little brighter, then you might want to steam your broccoli instead. Yeah, thanks, Maggie. Let's hold it up like that. So you can serve it in a serving platter like this. I was going to put it in this nice white dish. I thought it would be prettier, but I'm going to put that back in. Or you can just serve it onto individual plates. So I think that's everything. And then, of course, we want to chop that cilantro up, which I've got right here. Put that on top. I think that adds a lot of flavor. But don't forget the lime to squeeze that over the top. Or you can cut it and serve it at the table or something. You know, for the longest time, I would see lime or lemon at the end of a recipe, and I just kind of ignored it because I never stocked them. And I said, it's no big deal. I hope people in my classes know that the lime and the lemon are just what really make a recipe. And so I hope that you'll get in the habit of just stocking those. I always have some in my fridge and freezer, and because they add so much to the end of the dish. So don't skip over that today. If you had to skip over anything, it could be the cilantro, but I think that really adds a wonderful element too. And I hope you remember last week how I told you, if you wash that cilantro in the morning or something and let it dry, it's a lot easier to chop than when it's all soggy and wet. So I think that's our final dish. I'll put this on and squeeze a little lime on there. And then we're ready to go. And of course, do the lime to taste. I would put a lot on because I love lime. But what I hope you'll see in just these last couple minutes before we end, I wanted to point out a couple of things. And that is just that You know, a lot of people get so confused over, oh, I don't know how to eat healthy. It seems so difficult. And you know what's interesting is that here you just made this wonderful dish. And did you know that you just made 100% healthy dish right there? That's all it takes, just making things out of real whole foods with a good balance of starches and proteins and fats and vegetables. You've got a wonderful meal there. And so you don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, I don't know if I should eat whatever the food fad is today or the food diet of the day. Eat real whole foods. And notice how we don't have any preservatives, colorings, sweeteners, anything like that in there. It's all just real whole foods. And I know that part of the problem with that is, of course, you have to cook it. But that's why I love doing these classes, and I'm happy to help anyone who doesn't feel comfortable or capable in that route, because once we learn to, when we learn to cook, we empower ourselves to be able to make these kind of meals with real whole foods. So the other thing I want to talk about is just leftovers, because I'm thinking that a lot of you are going to have some leftovers, probably the sauce. And in that note, I cooked some of this beautiful black rice. And I don't know if you can see just, oh, there it is. Perfect, Maggie. You can see how beautiful that is. And can you imagine it? I'll just put a little bit of that sauce on there so you can see just how beautiful that is. So you could make the same dish, and hold on there, Maggie, and we'll put just a little bit of that pretty broccoli with it. And so that's another way you can do this, or with pasta. You can put this sauce on different vegetables. If you have leftover spaghetti squash, it can go into soups. It can go into, you know, you can use it instead of a starch with your vegetables and eggs in the morning. Of course, you could put pesto sauce on. There's so many uses for that. So have fun, because now that you got all these parts and pieces cooked, you can combine them. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is just that I hope, and I would love to get your feedback on this. I would love to hear, are you getting a sense of how cooking can be just a matter of combining Legos? Well, today you learned about roasting, and you learned about zesting, and you learned about juicing and when to add citrus to a recipe. So can you see how now you can take these same techniques and you already know them. When you see them in another recipe, you're all set to go. My hope is that I demystify cooking and show you how it's really just a matter of mixing and matching some, 8 to 10 different techniques, and then you're set. So anybody got any feedback on that? And I would also love feedback on how did you like this Saturday time? And was this recipe a little bit too weird? Like, do I need to stick to things that are a little more mainstream? Because I got a feedback from a couple of people that spaghetti squash? I thought spaghetti squash was really cool. So anyway, so feedback, anybody, and that's the end, you need to go. But I thought the Saturday class would be nice because it'd be a little more relaxed. You weren't under the gun. We had a little more time. We could start at 4 rather than at 5 or 5:30. But I would love to have any feedback from any of you. Thank you. Christine, you're always good on feedback.
Yeah. I love the Saturday time. This is great. And I think the recipe I love because you always come up with such creative things, and the fact that I'm trying to do more plant-based or whole foods, and I don't need as much meat anymore. Right. I still eat it, but it's just nice to have the options. Right. My question is, I just read an article about saving the zest for future recipes. Do you ever do that, or have a technique?
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because when I was kind of just doing a little bit of research, and Bon Appetit says no. They had an article on zesting and using citrus juice, and they said no because they feel like the longer you let it sit, it's exposed to air, which makes sense because that's true of all like spices and anything. Once they're ground or exposed to air, the volatile oils, which give it the flavor, dissipate. But I wonder if what you could do is zest it and immediately get it into the freezer.
Yeah. Well, the one I saw said to use an ice cube tray and put, like, if you're doing oranges, just freeze it with a little bit of orange juice in it.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Anyway, and a great way to get that in and not to waste those nutrients, because it's amazing how many nutrients are in that.
Anyways, thanks for helping me think again about stacking. Like, don't just eat the orange. Maybe zest it before I eat it, and then this.
I gotta tell you, I'm not very good about it either, but I'm gonna try.
Okay.
I've begun to eat more of the pith.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're so
Thanks,
welcome.
Mary.
Anybody else have any more
Thank
feedback?
you, Mary.
You're so welcome. And
Okay.
oh, Brenda, do you have some feedback on the?
Oh, the time?
Oh, wait, share it again, Brenda. I didn't see.
We did the Swiss chard instead, Mary, because I had bought so many frozen vegetables for all this situation, and now I need to eat some of them. So we
That's
just
a great idea. Yeah, tell me what vegetable did you use?
Swiss chard. It was frozen, and I just microwaved it and salt and peppered, and it's on the side.
Oh yeah, that works. I did it. I actually served mine on the bed of sauteed chard, which made it real pretty.
Yeah.
So you can do that too. Oh, excellent. I'm glad you brought that up because that was one of the options. And hi, Mark, by the way.
Mary.
Oh, good. And
That was fun.
any feedback on, how did you like the Saturday time? And
I liked it.
We liked it.
I think it is more relaxed,
I felt like it, yeah.
We went mushrooming before we got to this.
We went mushrooming, but we didn't find any mushrooms.
Oh, darn, because you have to share if you find them.
You can't even get it from us.
And Donna and Vince, do you have any feedback on what did you think of the recipe or the timing? Or if anybody has suggestions of other dishes that you'd like to make, or ingredients you'd like to work with, let me know.
I liked the timing. Having it a little earlier is nice because now we're done and we're ready to eat quite early, which we've been trying to do lately. So
Good. I agree with you. Yeah.
This was an easy to do alone. Vince wasn't helping me today, so Sunday is his day to cook. So when you did it or Tuesday and Sunday, so the last one was on his day to cook. So.
Oh, I'll make the next one on a Tuesday then.
I liked it.
How about Ashley and Eric? How'd it go? Oh, that's beautiful. Did you put it on rice rather than spaghetti squash?
No, it's spaghetti squash.
Oh, okay. I can't tell it. The color. Oh no. Yeah. The color was just a little off. Excellent, you guys. Did your spaghetti squash cook okay? It's all done.
The only thing was with our sauce, we don't have a zester, so like the orange peel was a little thicker.
Yeah.
You used a peeler, a vegetable
We
peeler.
just had a peeler.
Well, did you chop it up after you peeled it?
We did, but should have chopped it smaller probably.
Well, see what you think. I kind of like the chunks. I kind of sometimes
Like it?
in strips because I like the taste.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I like the taste. I don't know about the chunks.
Oh, okay. Well, you can also slice them into strips, real thin strips. Maybe that'd be better.
Yeah, we're excited. We're ready to eat too.
Okay, well, I bet everybody's ready, but oh gosh, you guys, thank you so much. I just love doing this, and I will try to do another one in June. And certainly, if you have any ideas, please send it to me. And I'd love to have you on with me again.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
I'm going to say bye for the camera.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This is the first time I've used your orange zester, Mary, and I love it.
Is that Donna?
Yeah, I bought one after one of the classes you had, and I forgot I had it. And it works really well.
I'm so glad. And maybe I wondered, Christine, whether, Donna, did you have any trouble? Like maybe Christine, I don't know how old yours is or how much you've used it. And maybe you need a new one.
That's what I was wondering. So,
Donna,
yeah.
Is this, you said like the first time or second time you've used yours?
Very first time I've used it, and it was great. I didn't grate my fingertips and
I'm so glad there's no blood in your sauce. I'm so glad to hear that, Donna. And then, yeah, so Christine, maybe think about it. And Christine, there's definitely different qualities of ones. I bought a Tupperware one that wasn't that good.
Mm.
And this little one, I'm trying to see, oh, it's a Pampered Chef. I gotta say, Pampered Chef, I have had good luck with their stuff.
Okay.
And so, and I do have a Pampered Chef contact if you need it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
Well, thank you.
oh, Christine, thank you so much. And
Take
do
care.
either of you have any questions?
I'm good. Ready to
Okay.
eat.
Go
Okay.
eat.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Donna, any more questions for you?
No, I think we're good. I'm going to just make a salad and then we're going to eat.
Excellent, Donna. Well, that sounds great. Well, I'm just going to say goodbye to the camera. And I'm so glad you could join us today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, so everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. This was great to have you online. And I hope you'll join me at the next Cook Together. Bye now. Okay. Okay.
Stop recording.
Yeah.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah.